So we are in chapter 3, team communication and difficult conversations. This is going to be a very instrumental chapter. We actually have 2 group assignments this semester in our business comm class. So this chapter is going to give you a lot of good insight and details about what to expect when working in those groups and setting up teams. As you can see with our learning objectives, this chapter is going to explain the principles of team communications in those high-performing teams. We're also going to be describing and demonstrating the approaches to planning, running, and following up on those meetings that we're having. We're going to cover explaining the principles of effective virtual team communication. Because we are an online class, that virtual piece is going to be vital working with your team members that are not face to face. We're going to describe strategies for effective group writing, and we're also going to explain those basic principles for handling those difficult conversations. And we're going to explain those basic principles for handling difficult conversations. As you can see here, when you're looking at effective team communication, there are some basic principles to consider. You want to focus on performance. You're going to go through the 4 stages to reach high performance, and we'll show that in a moment. But we're building that ability to work with different cultures and values and norms to work together towards a common goal. It's important to meet often when you're in a team. And you'll see that with our group assignment, because you have a week to complete the group assignment, logging in early, getting started sooner than later is going to be the best way to approach that team assignment. We also want to recognize and actively seek to avoid groupthink. And you're probably thinking, groupthink, that sounds like something that should happen. But we're going to define that shortly, and we want to definitely avoid it when it comes to team or group communications. Embracing diversity, solving problems and generating solutions, and then providing positive feedback and encouragement to each other when you are looking at the performances of each other. So as you're looking at the stages of development in these high performance teams, we're going to talk about the forming, the storming, the norming, and the performing in these different groups. And you can see the more months that a team works together, they're going to have a more higher performance value. So what is that forming? That's focusing on gaining that acceptance and trying to avoid the conflict that can arise when you're working in your groups. The norming, that's teams that arrive at a work plan. Everyone knows their roles, their goals, and they have that accountability for what they're responsible for. The storming, that's when team members open up with their competing ideas, like brainstorming and how the team should approach the different work. And then the performance itself, the team operates efficiently towards that goal that you're trying to accomplish. And in our class and in our case, it would be the final assignment being completed in a timely manner. So there are some principles when it comes to effective team communication. We've been touching base on some of those as we've been moving forward. Team culture. This is going to be important. That shared commitment, collective values, the norms, the responsibilities is shared in your group. You have the common goal of completing your assignments and working together efficiently. This typically is going to arise during the norming stage. That's where you're going to see the different components of the team culture arise. So with the team charter, this is something that some teams have found success with doing. It's writing out your actual plans, objectives, expectations, the mission, how you plan to communicate, possibly when you plan to communicate, how often, and then how you're going to give feedback. This is just a clarification of communication and expectations, and I have used them in previous classes, and I've seen them become a very effective tool for accountability. So when I mentioned earlier about this groupthink, the reason that is a negative aspect to team communication, it's because it promotes conformity in a way that discourages creativity and individual responsibility. And that conforming, you just start saying yes or agreeing when you might have different thoughts or different views on something, but you just begin to conform. So there are some symptoms that you'll see when you get into the groupthink mode: that collective rationalization, self-censorship, not speaking up when you have something to say that might vary from what the other team members are saying. Then there's an illusion that there's a unity there. So you want to be careful working with that groupthink outcome. Some other symptoms of groupthink include peer pressure, the illusion of invulnerability, complacency, starting to mind guard, and then stereotyping. So you want to be super careful with groupthink. So an alternative to that is embracing differing viewpoints, diversity, knowing that even though you are working on a similar goal, people are going to arrive at that goal in a different way. There are different thought patterns, or there's diversity in thinking based on quite a few different aspects: gender, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. All of these can influence that viewpoint. So when you are working with diversity, just understand that people experience different things, especially when it comes to customer service, retail. There are different viewpoints, so make sure that you are aware of diversity. There are some behaviors that drive diversity. You want to make sure that everyone's heard. You don't want to rush people or cut people off or block them from sharing their views. And this is in an efficient way when you're in your meetings, efficiently. You want to make sure it's a safe space for team members to express novel or new ideas. You want to give team members decision-making authority as well as sharing the credit. You want to acknowledge what others are doing and be encouraging and not take all the credit for the outcomes that are successful. Giving useful feedback is also important, and also putting feedback into action. Getting that feedback, hearing it, and making some changes and making things happen accordingly to what was said and what needed to be done. One way that effective teams can solve problems and promote creativity is through what we call cycles of divergence and convergence. Divergence, that's when you are separate, you're working independently, and you're using that time, maybe a problem or a challenge is presented, and you're independently considering solutions and ideas. And then when the group converges and comes back together, that's when you can discuss the different ideas that you might have come up with, do some collaboration, and refine those best ideas that stand out among the group. Because we are in a short class and you don't have a lot of time throughout the semester, when you are working with teams, it's very important to try to develop trust quickly. And one way to do that is to get to know each other. Just having that self-disclosure in that group, holding effective launch meetings, like your initial meeting, even if it's virtual, is one in such that it's effective and a lot is introduced so that everybody's on board and what the task is. You want to commit to working together and separately. So you might come together, as we talked about with that convergence piece, talk about what's happening, and then do the divergence to go out and take care of those parts that you are responsible for before you bring the group back together. And so having a schedule and evaluating performance is going to be key in these scenarios. So when you are planning for meetings, the chapter talks about different essential things to consider for meeting planning. Why are we meeting? What's the purpose? What do we expect to happen? Who should attend? And when should the meeting be scheduled? And when you're in these meetings, what are the roles and the responsibilities of those that are participating? Is there someone who's going to take the lead? Is there someone taking notes during the meeting? Is there someone keeping track of the time? So, what are the roles and responsibilities of those that are participating in the meeting? And you'll just see that an agenda is a great tool when you are in that planning process, knowing the materials to bring. Is there going to be a laptop? Is someone taking notes by hand or typing them out? When and how should I invite others? Are you sending out an email, or are you just posting something in your group chat saying, hey, this is when we're going to meet? And you can also see working through any logistical issues that may arise. I think it's fascinating that the book shares the least productive parts of a workday. So if you are an 8 to 5er, I think it's pretty neat to see the best times to meet when our minds are at its peak performance. So you can see here in this graph that working and meeting has very specific suggestions. So I think thought that was super cool to see. So there are two types of meetings that the book presents. Those coordination meetings where you're discussing the roles, the goals, and the accountabilities, as we mentioned earlier. And then there are meetings for the actual problem solving. That's when the brainstorming happens and you start addressing different challenges or problems to work through as a group. We've all seen the agendas. Agendas have openings for dates and times and schedules and calendars and different things like that. So having that agenda is a key component when you're in these long-term projects, because they help to keep things in place and scheduled well. When you are running effective meetings, you're considering a lot of different things, and you can see those here, such as expectations, that plan of action. When are we closing this meeting? Who's the facilitator? And also, even how to deal with difficult people. In some cases, you may have to deal with disruptive people in your meetings, those who might have an attitude or interrupt others or refuse to participate, or even those that might make negative comments. So the book suggests that strong leadership and a clear agenda helps with overcoming this. Also, being polite yet firm with your requests, such as, please allow everyone time to speak in our next meeting. These are some great details to utilize when you're working on those effective meetings. Following up after meetings is also important. If minutes were taken, it's great to send those out and have those documented. The date, the time, who was there, what were the roles of those that were there, the key decisions, and the discussion points and the outcomes, and then future items and deadlines that have been decided. So we are working with virtual teams because we are a virtual online course. So when you are working with virtual teams, you are aware that you're working with others that are from different locations. They are not sitting next to you in the classroom. So having some great skills and strategies with working with virtual teams is important. There's a great video, and I will post the link to this video inside of our Canvas classroom. So this video gives a case scenario of a virtual team dealing with cultural diversity. And it is a really great strategy-based video that will help you see how working in virtual teams can have some challenges and also give some strategies and tools to overcome them. So please consider reviewing this video on that virtual team and communication aspect. And again, I'll post the link to this video inside of our Canvas classroom. So some important things to note when working with virtual teams. You want to focus on building that trust. Like we mentioned earlier, the trust is important. as an initial stage in that virtual environment. Meet as often as possible. Hopefully, like if you are in your profession, you want to meet in person because that also encourages that trust. You want to get to know one another, use collaborative technologies, and you want to identify or choose an active team lead. When you are in a meeting, it's very important that someone is facilitating the meeting and moving things forward on the agenda. And you can see some strategies on building trust in your virtual teams. I won't read each of these word for word. Showing interest, just to name a few, sharing information, and offering help are some ways to help build that trust in the virtual environment, as well as living up to the commitments that you have decided in that team charter. If your team decided to create a team charter of accountability and expectations, and ensuring that all team outcomes are fair to the team members and to the stakeholders. So these are just some strategies that are mentioned to help create that trust in your teams. It is important to run effective virtual meetings. Virtual meetings can seem challenging at times, but they are also a great way to put that face-to-face piece together when you are working in the virtual environment. So starting the meetings on time, posing questions that get people thinking, making sure that the team members are involved, being very articulate, taking minutes, focusing on your teammates, and avoiding multitasking, meaning as you are presenting, if you are the presenter or the lead, trying not to do too many things at once. If you are the lead of a virtual meeting, you might ask another member to keep an eye on the chat stream and possibly start answering chat questions as you are leading the meeting, or reserving a time near the end of the meeting so that the questions can be answered. But just monitoring the chat can be tasked out to another team member, and using video when possible. It's really great to see faces in the virtual meetings versus just some boxes with names on them and not really knowing the attentiveness of the virtual team members. So if you can turn that camera on, this is a great time to get it on and be a part of the meeting visually. Some effective tips for group writing: start right away. Work together as you are planning. At the start, make sure everyone is participating, making sure that your roles and the contributions are fair. You don't want to have one person doing more than everyone else. So delegating and balancing out those responsibilities. Flexibility is so important. Meeting in real time consistently when you can versus just posting and being asynchronous. Discuss how you're going to edit the document together. It's one thing for everyone to compile and work together to put things in a document, but being able to edit as a team is also important as well. And then it says consider single group members to polish to the final version. So maybe your best editors in the group can do the final polishing when it comes to completing that final document. So, rounding up or wrapping up this chapter, I like the discussion on those difficult conversations. We all get in a situation where we might have to encounter those difficult conversations. It's important to know that many people do prefer to avoid them because they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And a lot of people just don't want to deal with conflict. So it's important to embrace difficult conversations. We want to assume the best in others. We want to make sure that we are in a learning stance versus a defensive stance. Staying calm, active listening. If you are not familiar with active listening, that's when you're listening to understand versus listening to respond. When you're listening to understand, you are able to recite back or say back to the person speaking what they have said. And that way you're communicating that you have heard them. It's clear what they were trying to communicate to you. You want to find a common ground. What's the balance to an outcome that is satisfactory for everyone? If you do disagree with someone, be diplomatic about it. In some cases, you might just need to agree to disagree and avoid exaggeration when you are communicating with others. So there are some steps. You want to start well and declare your intent. You want to listen, as I mentioned, that active listening to the other person's side of the story. When they are complete and their story has been told, then you share your story. Then you create a shared story, something that is balanced or a common ground. So the diplomatic disagreeing that I mentioned earlier, disagreeing well, comes with validation, recognizing that you have heard your peer and their perspective, and you add that their feelings are credible and legitimate. You don't have to agree with them, but you're just acknowledging that you have heard them and that you have an understanding of what they are sharing with you. It's clear. And you want to avoid being judgmental in your response. Instead of using you statements, you want to use I statements. That way you are being accountable for your side of things, your side of the story. By starting with I statements. I feel, I think, I believe. Avoid using you statements. And for the most part, that is a great summary of chapter 3. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure that you read the chapter because there's a lot more details that expand on these wonderful topics that I've covered here.